Just let the rhythm ride, and I'll survive somewhere inside it. Let me strum with the bass and drum. I wanna run to the place I come. Silence is pain, stress and pressure. Paint my picture, so much pressure. Kill the quiet, play it again. Keep me alive, never let it end. So let the rhythm ride, and I'll survive somewhere inside it. Let me strum with the bass and drum. I wanna run to the place I come.
Welcome to another episode of Maniacal Music Musings. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy. Every woman's new mistake. So get your hands off my woman while we're making out. She's growing on me. Love is only a feeling, so get to joining a fan club in my honor. My co-host, though, he's my best friend, and when he gets too baked on a show, all is forgiven immediately. He believes in a thing called love, but loves getting a Jamaica jerk-off from a dirty little girl. He's holding my own heart like that now, like some love on the rocks with no ice. Chancy motherfucking Greif.
Hi.
You like how I rhyme at the end there.
Yeah.
And of course, as always in this show, we are joined by a guest as well. And our guest this week is Brad Page from I'm in Love with That Song podcast.
Hey guys.
How you doing tonight, Brad?
I am great.
So why don't you give the audience a little preview of what your podcast is about?
Sure. Well, if you'll indulge me for a minute, here's the long-winded way that I like to explain my show.
That's right up my alley.
All right, long-winded. Let's go for it. So years ago, I read this book about the role that dogs played in like the Iraq War and 9/11, bomb sniffing and recovery and that kind of thing. I forget the name of the book, but one of the things that the author had to do to set up the story was to explain how a dog's sense of smell works. And they explained it like this. If I was to walk into a room with you guys with a bag with a McDonald's cheeseburger in it, you'd be able to tell without looking at it just by the smell that it was a cheeseburger. You could probably even identify it as a McDonald's cheeseburger if you'd eaten enough of them. But a dog doesn't just smell cheeseburger. A dog's sense of smell can differentiate that there's mustard on the burger, and if there's ketchup, it can smell the lettuce and the pickle, the onions, and the bun separately, all is distinct smells. A dog can tell the fat content of the burger. Is it 80% or 85%? The dog can probably even tell you what kind of cheese is on the burger. In other words, with our noses, it's all one big combined smell that we call a cheeseburger, but a dog senses all the individual elements that make up that end result of cheeseburger. So that's a long way of explaining that what I try to do on my show is to have people listen with their ears the way that a dog smells with their nose. We take a song and we listen to all the individual elements that make it up. What's the guitar doing in the background there? How are the bass and drums playing off of each other? How much reverb is on the vocals, giving it a sense of depth or immediacy? We listen closely to the performances, the arrangements, and the production, just to hopefully give you a new appreciation for a song that maybe you've heard 100 times before. Did I put
like
you
that.
to sleep with that?
No, I like that. That's a good way to look at songs, honestly. I mean, that's the way you should look at every song. I mean, once you hear one enough times, you kind of do pick up all those elements, but to really listen to the first time.
It's amazing that you can hear a song 100 times and then on that 101st time listen to it just a little bit differently and hear something you never heard there before. Songs are constantly revealing themselves to you, particularly, the better the song, the more there is, I think, for you to discover in it. And that's why, you can listen to a song 100 times and still love it. Whereas even your favorite movie, what do you watch it maybe 10 times? Music is just in a class by itself in terms of the way you can just constantly re-experience it in a new way.
I agree. I mean, the closest thing you can compare it to a television really is, I would say, Marvel movies and TV shows because every time you watch it, there's a new little thing you see in the background that's like a connection somehow to something else.
Right.
They throw in so many of those Easter eggs. It's ridiculous. But,
yeah, and in a lot of ways, songs are that same kind of thing that you can watch it or listen to it, and it, and the songs never change. They're always exactly the same. That song on your CD or vinyl never changes, but you change, and every time you listen to it, you bring a different perspective. With the way you hear a song when you're 18 years old is different than when you're 28, than when you're 38 and 48, and so you're constantly bringing something new to the music.
Exactly. I mean, how many times have I said in the show, Chancy, that like I would have loved this song when I was 18? Like I've had to say that about at least 10 different songs by now.
Yeah.
I mean,
which I think I brought forth when I actually enjoyed the songs when I was actually 18. So like a little sense of irony there.
Yes, exactly. But to get this show on the road, Brad, what CD did you choose to bring on, and why did you want to bring it?
Well, there's always probably a dozen records you could pick. I'm sure everybody says that when they come on your show. But I picked an album by a band called Jellyfish called Spilt Milk. And part of the reason why I picked it actually is kind of what you guys were just talking about, how, I think we all have this thing of the music that you discover when you're 15, 18, 22, the high school, college age years. That's the music that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And it's very rare that you hear or come across something in later years that hits you the way that music did when you were a teenager. It doesn't really matter when you were a teenager, whether it was the 70s or the 90s or today. That's the music that's going to stick with you forever. And you'll still find new music when you're 30 years old, but it typically doesn't knock you out in the same way. But this record did. I didn't discover this record until, God, I don't even remember how old I was, but I was no longer a kid, that's for sure. And yet it's in my pantheon as one of my all-time favorite records. And there's just not that much music that grabs you like that when you're past a certain point. But this record did for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you don't find things that blow you away when you're older. It's more when you're a teenager, you definitely do. I mean, especially back in the day.
Yeah, it's the way you live it, right? It's the music is a part of your life. It's a sense of discovery, whatever it is that when you're 16 years old, when you get your first get your driver's license and you're driving down the road and cranking whatever tunes that you're listening to at the time. I mean, that feeling will come back to you when you're 50 years old and you hear those songs again. But, something that you come across when you're 40, it's just not the same. The music ingrains itself on you at a younger age that you just can't let go of.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's some stuff that Chancy has brought on this show, though, that has hit me in that way. Like, as soon as I hear it, I'm like, this is a band I now will listen to a lot.
Sure.
Like one of my top Spotify playlists now is This Is Dog Fashion Disco. Yep, which Chancy's wearing the shirt. But I guess I'll go my review first, Chancy, since I seem to be the long-winded one tonight.
That's all right.
Well, when you first sent me the CD, I'm like, all right. It came out in 93. I've never heard of this band before, which on this show is not normal. I haven't heard of a lot of the bands that come on this show. But as soon as I started previewing some tracks to figure out what I wanted to bring, I'm like, this is interesting. and I'll get to what I brought later, of course. But today, this is the first thing I listened to in my hour and a half drive this morning. I listened to your CD first, and I hit play, and it was some damn good driving music, like first thing in the morning. Damn good driving music.
That's interesting. Cool.
I enjoyed the hell out of it. I mean, it almost, and I'm probably gonna get slapped shitless by some people for saying this, but it reminds me of if the music of Elton John got matched with the singing style of the Beatles.
That's not far off. I mean, it's from that. Those are all inspirations for these guys.
I'm
The
sure.
Beatles, Queen is a big inspiration for them, and that I hear a lot of that in the music. Not that he's singing like Freddie, but just the for me, I grew up in the 70s. So for me, like when I think of like what a classic album versus great songs, but to me, what makes a classic album is the journey that it takes you on. Cliches like Dark Side of the Moon or whatever, but they're records that from the time you start to the time you get to the end, it takes you on a journey, and it takes you through all different types of music and different sounds. And, there's heavy things and light things and goofy things and weird things and maybe scary things or whatever. But every song is different. To me, that's a great record when every song is different. Every song doesn't sound like the one that came before it or the one that's coming after it. Queen would do that on albums like Night at the Opera and Day at the Races. And, that's sort of a hallmark to me of great records. And this album does that. It's designed to take you on a journey.
Sheer heart attack.
Yeah.
He didn't say that one for a reason, Chancy. Come on now, don't put your
previous
album.
It took you on a ride. It took you on a ride.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get what you're saying, and funny enough, that's actually what I love about Dog Fashion Disco is that like their CDs do that. Like every song is a different genre of music, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
but
I love that.
But I mean,
a lot of people don't know what to do with a record like that, or some people are so locked into their genre. They're a death metal person, and so if it doesn't deviate from that, they don't want to hear it. But for me, a great record should have a little bit of everything on it.
I agree. I mean, and yeah, we've had a lot of albums like that in the show actually, but this CD you brought, I mean, it came out in '93. I would have been 5 years old, so I mean, but yet some of it sounds familiar. Like I think I've heard it places before. I don't know if it's been in movies and TV shows or whatnot, but it's just some of the songs I just have recollection of. I don't know why, but
it didn't get very much play. The story of the band is that it's basically the brainchild of two guys, Andy Sturmer, who was the vocalist and drummer actually, and Roger Manning Jr., who was the keyboard player and kind of second vocalist in the band. And they originally came out of San Francisco. They had a band called Beatnik Beach that didn't really go anywhere. And they got together as Jellyfish. They put a record out, a first album called Belly Button that got some play on MTV. It was not a smashing success, but it did get a little bit of attention, enough for the record company to give them money and a lot of money to go back into the studio and make this record. And so they decided they wanted to make their masterpiece with this record. And it's literally, everything in the kitchen sink is in this record. But it came out in '93, which was like the height of grunge, right?
Yeah.
Nobody was listening to this kind of music at that time. They couldn't get the time of day of any radio. It didn't get any play. And at that point, that was still, you had to be on MTV and you had to get radio play. And if you didn't, you were sunk. And that's basically what happened to them. They toured hard. They certainly put in the work, but it just didn't pay off. And they sort of petered out after this record. Those two guys had a falling out, and I don't think they've actually spoken since then. They've done other work independently, but so it's kind of was like a firework, just this intense explosion of creativity and then gone, which I think is a shame. But to me, this is a brilliant album from start to finish.
Yeah, I immensely enjoyed it. Chancy, how about you? What's your review of Jellyfish?
I wasn't sure how to feel about it really. Like I know that when I played it, and then within the first track or two, like I'll listen to like 20 or 30 seconds of the first two tracks to kind of get a feel for what I was looking for my album, because I was at work at the time. And I had been kind of looking for a reason to bring my album to the table. And I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm going to pull the trigger. But it was almost as if like the Beatles never broke up and kind of finished their hippie session.
I get that.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff like sometimes you could almost say it seemed like somewhat of a sensory overload.
Yes, I think that's intentional. Particularly on certain tracks where, like I said, they're really throwing everything in the kitchen sink in there, all kinds of instruments. There's no samples on this record. Like everything that you hear is a real instrument being played, the strings and whatnot. None of it's, digital samples or anything. They actually had all that stuff in there. And there's a lot. You can listen to this record on headphones and really get lost in.
Catch a lot of different sound.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, the album it's not really a concept album, but it's structured to be like a night. Like, so the first track, Hush, is a lullaby, and it's sort of, you fall asleep, and then all the successive songs are like an individual dream that you might have. And then at the very end of the last song, there's an alarm clock, and that's the last thing you hear, right? It's sort of buried in the mix, but if you listen, you'll hear it, and that's sort of like you waking up in the morning. So, so the songs are intentionally kind of, I don't know what to say trippy, but they're kind of, they're just wacky in a way, just the way dreams can be kind of wacky.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, and the whole thing you said about the Beatles, Chancy, if anything, it kind of reminds me a little bit if you listen to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, like from start to finish. Like it kind of reminds me of that flow, like that flow from track to track.
Yeah, I'm sure that was kind of a template for them. Also, the Beach Boys, I can hear that. The Pet Sounds, that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's one point where Roger Manning does a vocal that's like a dead on, like Brian Wilson impersonation. So they're all of that stuff. It's all part of the stew that makes up this record.
Yeah, I found it great, but well, we can do our top fives now. And Brad, since it's your album, you get to go first.
Well, so my favorite track on the record is probably the second song, which is called "Joining a Fan Club," which it's literally about, joining a fan club and about how it's, basically squeezing money, a way to squeeze money out of fans. But there's a couple of lines in there where they start to talk about like religion and Jesus. And, when you think about it, what is religion but really just a big fan club for one particular very famous person? So that always kind of intrigued me, kind of the comparison of like, being enthralled by your pop star versus being, in love with Jesus. I mean, is there really that much difference? Let's see. Ghost at Number One is another song I love. That's kind of about how the industry takes dead rock stars and turns them into never-ending supply of money. Right? You can always come out with, they always finding shit in the vault for somebody who died 50 years ago, but yet there's still albums coming out. Let's see. Sabrina, Paste, and Plato, which is a strange title. That's kind of their attempt to do a very Who-like 3-minute rock opera. That's the one that has a little bit of, I think, Brian Wilson in that one. I like that one a lot. My Best Friend which was very inspired by Harry Nilsson. I don't know if you guys are fans at all of Harry Nilsson. Was pretty influential singer-songwriter in the 70s. The Beatles were big fans of Harry. And I don't know if you clocked it listening to that song, but he's singing about his penis. My best friend.
I now have to re-listen to that song later. I'm just saying. But.
Yeah. It's one of those things like you could listen to it 100 times. Hey, you just sing about my best friend. But when you gluck the lyrics, like, oh my gosh, that's what the dude's singing about. And let's see. I
wonder if that's what Freddie Mercury was singing about too.
Could be, or someone else's penis. Too much, too little, too late. Maybe my fifth pick off this record. That's the second to last track. But for me, there's no weak tracks on this record. I love this thing from front to back. I could listen to it on end and never get bored. It's one of those records for me. Your mileage may vary, but for me, it's a winner.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had to like really pick a top five. Like I at first I was just putting like every song on that. I'm like, wait a minute, no, I need to think about this a little bit more. But it just every track was hitting me good, basically. But I did have one honorable mention though outside my top five in this one, and that's New Mistake. That track is amazing.
It is, and that's the song that both Andy and Roger, like I said, they don't even speak to each other anymore. But if you were to, I've read interviews with them, and they both picked that song as the one that most represents Jellyfish to them, what their goal was. I love that song too. I mean, I didn't have it on my list, but I think it's a great song. But it's interesting that that's their favorite song for what that's.
It's definitely, you could definitely hear it a little bit too. But that was my honorable mention. My number 5 is Joining a Fan Club, because that was a really good song and kind of, in some ways, a little creepy. But I mean, it was definitely amazing.
It's a great riff too. I think that's a great song.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Number 4 was Bye Bye Bye, because, well, one, the comedy in my head at that point where I'm like, did NSYNC steal this from them? But I mean, that was a good song. Like, and I think if I'm not mistaken, that's towards the end of the CD.
It's towards the end. It's the second half of the disc. Yeah.
It was just a really good, like, the way it was like so soft and melodic at the same time. Number 3 is He's My Best Friend, which I'm happy I put that there now that you mentioned that detail. But it's kind of like this other album we had on a month or so ago. Who the hell was it, Chancy, about pissing in the wind?
It was me. It was Incubus.
Oh,
2 reasons to piss in the wind. Anyone who does will end up smelling. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was. Okay. I couldn't think it was that or if it was a Primus thing, but actually wasn't it a Primus thing too? Whipping in the Wind?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so.
I don't know. I'm thinking of something. But anyway, my number 2 was All Is Forgiven, because I liked that they went a little like metal almost in that.
Yeah.
Same.
The opening on that one was amazing. And so I had to put that on. And then my number 1, well, it was a great song because it's my kind of music, but also number 2, I am a paranormal podcaster. So The Ghost at number 1 definitely caught my attention when it came on and kept my attention the whole song. It was definitely my favorite song out of the whole album.
Cool.
And plus, I mean, I kept thinking of like, it's funny. I was just guesting on a podcast last night talking about Prince having albums that haven't released yet that are probably going to release at some point. And me and the podcast were joking like, yeah, he's probably living in Jamaica with Tupac. But I mean, yeah, that's what it made me think of him, Michael Jackson, all of them, like all the dead celebrities who still amazingly have tracks that release because record labels like to make money, or families.
Yep.
But
I mean, some of it's good. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I love to hear music from artists that I wish were still around. But at some point you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, and sometimes it's just constantly repackaging the same stuff over and over again. Greatest hits and best ofs and whatnot just get repackaged, and it's like, ugh.
I think Prince is the only person out of the entire group that should be like removed and set to the side, because he went as far as to like getting his own masters back and owning all of the rights to all of his music, and then basically being a recluse for like however long it was he was, and like going on tours here and there and doing this and that. So I mean, for them to say that he has like they did say that he had like 100 albums that haven't been released. That's feasible. That's absolutely feasible. If you can play 27 instruments and you've got like over a decade of nothing but time on your hands, I'd buy it.
Sure. Yeah. The question is, would these artists want some of this stuff released? I think he felt, at least for a certain period, that that he was being pressured by record companies not to release stuff, and I think he would have liked to have released more. But I think for a lot of artists, there's reasons why stuff doesn't come out, because they're not happy with it, because they didn't want it to see the light of day. And then as soon as they're dead, some old manager or second cousin or record company person digs it out and puts it out. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. Again, sometimes I'm happy to hear it, but how would the artist really feel about that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened to Eddie Van Halen too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at the freaking Frank Sinatra CD that came out like 10, 15 years ago, where it was just him with like modern day singers, and they literally just took his songs and add in breaks for other people to sing their lines.
Right.
Like it's kind of sickening in a way. It's almost as bad as probably the hologram performances that are coming soon in this world. But
those will be, yeah.
But Chancy, what were your top 5?
Actually, my honorable mention was already mentioned. It's the joining a fan club for myself.
Cool.
Number 5 was Bye Bye Bye. Number 4 was Too Little, or Too Much, Too Little, Too Late.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 was Brighter Day. Number 2 was All Is Forgiven. And number 1 was The Glutton of Sympathy.
Nice.
It all kind of, I don't know, kind of all reached out to me, and for certain reasons and certain elements. And
sure.
I mean, yeah, the Gluttony song, where I almost put that on my list. Almost did, because I love that. That was a really good song. I'm not gonna say I love it, but it was a really good song.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me tomorrow, my list would probably be a little different. But like I said, I love everything about this record. So I'm at the moment, I'm listening to any one particular song as probably my favorite until the next song comes on. But yeah, I don't know what else I can say. I love this record. I hope some people give it a shot, because I think it's a lost classic. It just, timing was bad. That just sometimes happens. They were going left when the zeitgeist was going right, and they totally got overlooked. And I think it's a shame.
it was good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, 1993. I mean, it was a tough time in the music world. Like, things were changing dramatically in a lot of different levels. So, a lot of bands got overlooked that shouldn't have back then. And yet, bands like freaking Bush got record deals and whatnot. So,
Yeah, you leave them. You leave them alone.
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about how there was a mad rush up to Seattle. Everyone on the Sunset Strip got dropped like a bad smelling burrito, and everyone headed up to Seattle to sign anyone with long, greasy hair and flannel shirts. And that was kind of the last gasp of rock and roll being a chart-topping thing. After that, then hip hop took over, and boy bands and whatever it is that we have out there now that I'm not even sure what you call it, but it's past me at this point. But I'm an old fart.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all. I feel like I'm getting older every day, but
Funny how
kids
that
will do
works.
that. Kids will do that. But all right, I think we'll do my CD next, Chancy, and we'll end up on yours.
Works for me.
All right.
But so, listeners, the CD I decided to bring this time, which once I started listening to Jellyfish, I was like, who can I? So I actually had to look up and be like, all right, what genre are they technically considered for this CD? And it's like glam rock. I'm like, ooh, good possibilities in glam rock I could do. I was like, Queen, no. Motley Crue, maybe no. And then I was like, you know what? I hear Elton John music in this, and I'm just gonna go with Elton John. So I decided to bring Goodbye Yellow Brick Road because, well, one, it's one of his best CDs. We recently did an Elton John bracket a couple months ago, and that was the CD that had the most tracks, I believe, in the actual bracket. I could be wrong on that. I think that CD had the most songs in it. And plus, I knew one of Chancy's favorite songs was on it, so I had to bring it. But yeah, I mean, it was just the one I wanted. I was looking at the song list on it. I'm like, yeah, I'll bring that one. I almost brought like one or two other ones, but I was like, Yellow Brick Road first. I'll bring the other ones eventually. I know I will. And
it's a classic.
It is.
Sure.
And a lot of these songs, like I've talked about during the bracket and whatnot, but I basically like grew up listening to a lot of these of the most popular songs from the CD, like in my dad's workplace over and over again. So this is what I grew up with. And like you said, when you're younger, certain things hit you with impressions that you don't get anymore. And Elton did that. Mm-hmm. So that's why I wanted to bring it. And plus I thought it did fit Jellyfish right much. So it worked.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. But you could listen to these two records like one after the other and it wouldn't be a jarring experience.
Which I did. I literally listened to your album, then listened to my album. So
there you go.
But as our guest, you get to go next, Brad. What's your review of this album besides the big?
Well, I mean, it's a masterpiece. There's a term that gets used for artists when they're in a particular phase. Very few artists have it, but they call it the imperial phase. Stevie Wonder had it in the 70s. Prince had it. But it's basically when an artist just seems to be churning out record after record, and they're all classics, and they'll have a run of like 4 or 5 records that are just, in a row that are just brilliant. Sometimes they're never able to top that again. But I mean, most people are lucky to get one good song in their life, let alone 4 or 5 albums of great stuff. Right. I mean, Elton, this was the peak of his imperial period, where he just would, and the thing about the 70s, 60s and 70s is these guys would do, these artists, these bands would do like 2 albums a year, sometimes more than that. And you're going to think these guys, they'd go into the studio, they'd make a record in a short amount of time, they'd put the record out, they'd go on the road, tour their asses off, go back into the studio with no break, make a second record, and then go back out on tour. And it was this relentless thing. It's amazing that people were able to make any good records at all. And yet you have these bands that would make great records. Queen's another one. Just Pink Floyd, just album after album that are, each one of them is a classic. And now artists will go like 5 years between albums.
Tell me about that.
They have the luxury of taking their time and whatever, but back then the record companies just hustled you in and out of the studio and the road and the studio and the road until you were basically exhausted or so fucked up on drugs that, you know.
I was gonna say I was just, if you hadn't said it, I was gonna be like, you forgot one major ingredient in your entire your entire thing there. Every one of those guys real fucking high on drugs.
Yeah.
I
And
was
I
on-
mean, you know, but that sort of goes hand in, a lot of them just, you know, I mean, how are you going to physically,
How you gonna keep up?
right? And a lot of them paid a heavy price for it.
Facts.
Not all glamorous, but you know, however it was done, the fact is a lot of these guys turned out some just of the greatest music that was ever made, and this record is, you know, it's in that category. I mean, it's a double album, and like every double album, you're not going to love everything that's on it.
Of course not.
I don't think there's any real stinkers on this album. There's songs that, you know, I have to say Benny and the Jets, I don't care if I ever hear that song again. I'm not a fan, but basically everything on this record, I think is pretty great. I guess if I was to pick my 5, I'd probably number 5.
Let Chancy give his review first. Then
Oh,
we'll
yeah,
get into
I'm
top
sorry.
fives.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
No,
I was gonna say let him say his top 5. I mean, we already did a bracket on Elton John anyway. So what's the point in me giving an opinion on one of his albums? I mean, really, come on. But no, for real though, Brad, what's your top 5, man?
I would say Harmony at number 5. Candle in the Wind at number 4. That's one that's easy to get sick of, but I think if you step away from it a while and you know re-listen to it without all the baggage it carries, it's still a pretty emotional, pretty song. Number 3, Saturday's All Right for Fighting. Number 2, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, the title cut. I'm going to cheat a little bit on number 1. I'm going to combine Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding as one track. I think that's just one.
It is one track technically.
Technically, right.
Yeah, technically,
each other. And
I mean, in our bracket, it was one song. So
well, perfect. So
yeah.
I'm within the bounds. Great.
Yeah, it's funny. We actually had some that were in common and some that were right close to being common. So that's funny. But I mean, usually with my CDs, I have a hard time not pulling a Jeremy and wanting to go for the whole CD. But with this one, I actually didn't have a hard time with that. I had 2 honorable mentions, though. Dirty Little Girl and Jamaica Jerk Off. They were both not really, like, I had never heard either of them before, I don't think. And they're not really like Elton John songs to me in a way. They're just like kind of like a different side of him I haven't seen before. So that was a nice little surprise. But number 5 was Harmony. We matched on that one because that's a damn good song.
Yep.
But number 4 for me is Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding because I do love that song, but it's not top 3 material in this CD. Because number 3, ironically now, is Benny and the Jets. Because I agree, you can get very sick of that song very fast if you hear it constantly. I heard it so many times in my dad's workplace, and one day sometimes it was just like ridiculous. But I mean, I haven't heard it since we did the Elton John bracket back in, I think that was October. So, I mean, it's been a few months since I really heard it, and I was like, all right, you know, it's still top 3 material. Number 2 is Saturday's All Right, because that's an amazing song. It always has been, always will be. I never get tired of that song.
Mm-hmm.
And number 1 was the title track, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, because Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is just classic Elton John. Like, it's just that. You hear that song and you automatically just think those glasses and those outfits.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, 100%. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is an amazing song. But so those are my top 5. What about you, Chancy?
Well, not exactly the same. Number 5 for me was Sweet Painted Lady.
It's a good song.
Deep cut. Good pick.
And number 4 was Goodbye Yellow Brick Road.
Yeah.
Number 3, Candle in the Wind was begrudging for me because of the everything around it. Number 2, Benny and the Jets, because I just knew I had to do it. And then, I mean, as soon as he listed the name of the album, I was like, oh, dude, Saturday's number 1, right out the gate. Saturday is the perfect night for fighting.
Such a great guitar riff too, man.
Right?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yes, I mean that's why I picked it, because it's just I mean I knew Chancy, and Saturday is just freaking. I knew right away he was gonna be like, oh, number 1, but
I didn't listen to I honestly didn't listen to your album at all, Jeremy. I picked all of those just simply from like memory.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't need to, you don't need to. It's that simple. But all right, Chancy, the time has come. God help us all. Let's talk about.
What do you mean, God help us all? My album was pretty awesome.
Let's talk about what it is you brought that you so call an album.
Okay. I brought The Darkness is the name of the band, and their album is called Permission to Land.
I believe in a thing called love, just a turn of my heart. There's a chance we can make it now. We'll be looking till the sun goes down. I believe in a thing called love. Ooh, get down.
I don't know. I picked it because, like, when it first came out, their single off of it, I hated it with a passion of it, like the burning passion of 1,000 suns. I hated it. I hated it. And then, like, after a while, I got to listen. Like, I listened to it like later on. It was probably like 10 years later, and I was like, you know, not being a dick, that's really fucking that's really tricky to that's tricky to pull off. And then I went back to it, and then I was like, all right. And then I finally fell in love with it. It's like a guilty pleasure song of mine. But yeah, so I had to, like, I've been waiting for an opportunity to match this up with some album in some capacity, just so I can just be like, oh, here we go. And this is it right here.
Well, Brad, what did you think of Chancy's album?
I have one Darkness album in my collection. It's not this one. It's the one called One Way Ticket to Hell and Back, which is a great album title. So I guess I would say, you know, I'm aware and somewhat familiar with these guys, but I'm not, you know, a hardcore fan by any stretch. So this was actually the first time that I've listened to this album front to back. You know, I think my reaction to it is probably like a lot of people. Like, what makes or breaks the record is how you feel about him as a vocalist.
Yes.
And he's got some mannerisms that could probably drive you crazy. I also know people who love this band. I have a fellow podcasting friend who's just big Darkness fan. So, you know, what works for some people doesn't work for others. I could sort of take it or leave it. There's some songs where it's fine. There's some songs where it does get on my nerves a little bit. But, you know, these guys are definitely, yeah, at first I thought they were more of a put on, more of almost like a spinal tap, intentional spinal tap. But I don't quite think that anymore. I think they definitely have a sense of humor. They don't take themselves that seriously, which I think is always a good thing, because if some rock stars are just way too serious, particularly when you're making this kind of music, you gotta just lighten up.
Right.
And it's a fun record in that respect. I mean, you know, these songs, they pretty much all rock. A lot of them are much better pop songs than you might think would come from
right.
this. They're actually, like, you know, pretty catchy and have good melodies and are well written. And the performances are great, just musicianship wise. So yeah, it was fun to listen to this record.
Well, now, Chancy,
Come on. Come with it now.
The album cover deceived me because when you first sent the album, I'm like, huh. And then I saw that one song title. I'm like, no, it just can't be. It just can't be.
It's not this.
It's not the same song. It's just another song with the same name. And then as soon as I played the first track and heard this guy's voice, which seriously, it's like every note he sings, it's like, how deep is he getting fingered in the ass at that point? Because that's what it sounds like is happening while his voice keeps changing. But it's just, I mean, oh my God. Like my brother used to love this CD when the one song when it first came out. Like,
yeah.
Like he loved that song. He used to play it all the fucking time. I used to hate the shit out of that song, and I still am not a fan of it by any means. Like I can appreciate it.
I hated it at the time.
I can appreciate it a little more now, but it's still not a song I ever would just randomly put on my car. Or like even if it came on a mix, I'd be like, nope. I mean, it's just I mean, some of these weren't bad, but it's just like I'm like, what the fuck am I listening? And then I'm like, oh, only 40 minutes long. Okay, good. Let's get through it. Yeah, it's like, why couldn't I be listening to something fun like my screams while getting a hemorrhoid removed right now? But yeah, but they weren't horrible. You've brought worse.
That's a ringing endorsement.
Nah, he's not lying though. I've brought albums that nearly brought him to tears before. Like he contemplated all the decisions in his life after he heard my album. Well, whichever album. There's a lot of them.
Yes, I contemplated some choices in co-hosting times with certain albums. But so Chancy, what were your top 5 of your album, if you want to call it
that? Number 5 is Get Your Hands Off My Woman. Basically 5, 4, and 3 I kind of really liked based on like the riff, the way the song, like the way the vocals blended with the melody and the riff and everything. Like I said, number 5, Get Your Hands Off My Woman. Number 4 was Making Out. Number 3 was Holding My Own. Number 2 was Growing on Me. And that one made me kind of think of Casey a little bit because it's kind of one of those things like who grew on who first, like. But my number one.
Typically, the one who's more like a fungus, but
Right. But for me, mine obviously number 1 is I Believe in a Thing Called Love. Oh, I mean, hands down. Because of the fact of just the sheer difficulty of singing that song as someone who was in choir for like 10 years, like for real, just to sing that song is hard.
Yeah. Well, Brad, what were your top 5 as a guest?
My number 5 would be the opening track, Black Shuck. I think it's a great riff and guitar tone. I was really digging it, but that's one where his vocals dinged it for me, so I can't rate it any higher than that. Number 4 would be I Believe in a Thing Called Love. Number 3 is Growing on Me. That's one I think is just a great song, just compositionally, and I think any other artist could cover that and have a hit with it. Number 2 would be Love Is Only a Feeling, which I think is his best vocal, at least for my tolerance level on this record. And number 1 actually was Friday Night. That was the song I enjoyed the most.
Well, believe it or not, Chancy, I actually did have 2 honorable mentions on this CD, if you want to call it that. But my honorable mentions were, funny enough, Get Your Hands Off My Woman and Making Out. Because those were okay. They were okay. But my number 5 was Growing on Me. Because, I mean, most of these songs I picked are it's for the guitar or it's for the drums. It's the guy's voice makes me want to keep punching him until his voice gets higher. But basically. But number 4 is Holding My Own. Number 3 is Love on the Rocks with No Ice, because I thought that was ironic.
Yeah.
Great title.
Yeah, I like the title. That's the main reason I picked it. But title's full of irony, actually. But number 2 is Love Is Only a Feeling. We matched on that, Dave. Or Brad. Wow. Fucking the kid I work with today was named Dave. But
Nice.
and number 1, of course, is I Believe in a Thing Called Love, because how can you not? Like, just the fact that was a song in high school that everybody used to make fun of, and try their attempt at singing it, but no one ever could do that. I mean, Freddie Mercury would have killed it, but anybody else, no.
I was able to do it back in high school. It was one of those, low things that you do when you're at parties and girls find out that you were in choir for a while. You sing certain songs and hit certain notes, and they're like, "Oh, this song came on. Oh, try it out." Ah, Jesus.
Well, honey, I'd be doing my tongue exercises. I do declare. But yeah, so those are our 3 albums for tonight. And all in all, they all kind of blend together in a way that was very close to perfect. So we don't do that often. So that's an achievement right there. But usually one of us throws something out left field that doesn't really blend. But depends who's the guest. But Brad, it's been really fun having you on.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it to come on and talk about this record that, hopefully some more people will check it out.
Hopefully, because it's definitely an album worth checking out 100%. I mean,
yeah, I would say so. I think even if it's not your cup of tea, I think it's a record that that everyone should at least listen to it, give it a shot. It's kind of a cult. They become a cult favorite, for whatever that's worth. They're not going to make you rich, but there is definitely a sort of I don't know if underground's the word, but there's a hidden army of people who like this record and love this band. And so
I'm definitely going to run it by my buddy Rick Pat and see if he knows anything about it.
Cool.
Well, the only thing I have to say is there a story behind the album cover? Because I forgot to ask that, but
not that I know of.
It was just a weird album cover.
Yeah.
Right?
Like that ginger fat girl just licking ice cream or whatever it was. It's just what the heck?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the idea of spilt milk, right?
Right.
True. Didn't think of that.
Yeah, I think the shot was taken in the studio where they recorded it. It was the kind of people surrounding the record is a sort of pretty impeccable group of people who worked on it. It was produced by the 2 guys in the band plus Albie Gluten and Jack Joseph Puig, who Albie is an old school 70s producer, totally from the school of where these kind of records come from that we were talking about. And Jack Joseph Puig, this was an early production of his, but he went on to be one of the most sought after producers in the 90s and 2000s. And he's known for having a studio full of some of the most mouth-watering vintage gear you can ever imagine. Other musicians have played on the records: T-Bone Wolk, legendary studio bass player, John Bryan, Lyle Workman, studio guitar players playing on it. So there's a lot of great players and participants in this record. Not household names, but guys who've definitely knew their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell. I mean, it was an amazing album. And So, Brad, why don't you tell the listeners one more time where your podcast is and where they can find it?
Sure. The name of the podcast is I'm in Love with This Song. You can find it. The website is lovethatsongpodcast.com. We're on Stitcher and Spotify and Amazon and Google and Apple and, basically whatever your favorite podcast app or podcast player is, just search for the I'm in Love with That Song podcast and you'll find me there. Give it a shot.
Yeah, this man seems like he knows his music, so I would definitely give it a checking out there.
Well, thank you, sir.
For sure.
Sir Chance-a-Lot, where can you be found?
Well, there's obviously the Book of Faces. That's under my name. It's down there. Instagram and Instagram and TikTok is the Red Eye Roundtable, and on Twitter it is Red Eye Table, because apparently Twitter does not get the idea behind a joke. And pretty much anywhere. I'm kind of like, not necessarily homeless, but like will podcast for exposure.
That sounds so wrong. But yeah. Well, to our listeners, always you could find us at Paranormal Normal / Maniacal Music Musings podcast with an S Facebook group. You can find us on Twitter and the Gram as @JuggaloBastard. You can find us on TikTok as @JuggaloBastard Podcast. And you can find us on YouTube just by searching Maniacal Music Musings. We will be back live this Sunday with a new episode. And then we will be back the Tuesday after as well. Thank you all for watching / listening. And we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Brad, once again for coming on. It's been amazing.
My pleasure.
To be a loaded gun. save you.